Wonderful. It is an amazing and deeply moving pleasure for me to be here today. I have a confession to make. I speak 4 words of Tamil, none of them very well. I've been sitting in the audience listening to things I can't really understand, but feeling your deep commitment to your culture and to being sure that your children carry it on. So it is my privilege to talk to you a little bit today, being a bit mindful of the time. In a way, I have no business being up here. If somebody had asked me 8 years ago that I would be standing here today, I would have said to them, "You've got to be kidding. I'm a professor of Russian. I barely knew where Sri Lanka was. But what I knew is that I needed a break, like we all do sometimes, from our lives. And I applied for a Fulbright, and before I knew it, I was being sent with my family to Sri Lanka. And I taught there for over a year at the University of FeTNA. And to be perfectly honest with you, I lived in a colonialist bubble. I had a gardener, I had a cook, I lived a life of colonialist privilege. I sort of felt like Rudyard Kipling. And I'd gone there not only to teach in the English batch, but I had gone there to write a book of creative nonfiction. It was supposed to be a memoir of our life on the island, but I didn't really know how that memoir was going to take shape or what was going to happen. But at the end of the year, this was at the end of 2002, something was wrong. A very fragile peace process, a ceasefire, had taken place between the Tigers and the central government. But I hadn't gotten up to Jaffna. And when I looked at my manuscript, I understood that it was a manuscript that told only half the story. It told the story of our wonderful life in the Central Highlands, but it hadn't really grappled yet, not in a direct way, with the war. Towards the end of our stay there, we went up to Trincomalee. The A9 road had just opened, and we were able to make a detour and get over to Trinco. I slept on the floor of somebody's house and walked around a city that was struggling to come to life again. I walked out onto a beach that had recently been demined and looked at windows that had been blasted in by shrapnel. I came back to the United States and I worked on this book knowing that I had to go back. And on December 26th, 2004, I came downstairs to my kitchen the day after Christmas to do some dirty dishes. And I saw places that I had known and loved falling into the sea. It took me several months to undo things and to wrap up things on this side of the ocean and to get back. And I went back to Sri Lanka for the better part of the next year. And it was during this time that I finally got myself up to Jaffna. It was there that I started teaching at the university. I gave some lectures. And I'd like to read you some portions, some segments of this book right now. While I was up in Jaffna, I spent an awful lot of time just listening to people's stories, basically listening to heartbreak. And this is what one student told me one day. I started out as follows. Home and homelessness are another one of those topics that sits just under the surface of the everyday, as the foundation of people's lives continues to shift. I was introduced to a young woman who, over tea, told me that she and her family had moved 15 times in 20 years. Quote, there would be a vacant house or a piece of property next door, and someone would move in, either the government forces or the Tigers. They would be using it as a storage area for arms or whatever, so we knew we couldn't stay. And we moved on to the next place. Finally, we decided to shift ourselves out to Delft Island off the northeast coast here. It's the place with the wild ponies. So we went there, thinking we would be safe. Then the government forces attacked it. I think I am still feeling the trauma of this. I don't know if I will ever be able to settle and have a home. War and homelessness have been the norm ever since I was born." Unquote. What, I wonder, constitutes the norm in a war zone? Normal life, a professor at the university told me, was no electricity in the city of Jaffna for 10 years and severely rationed gas. The young woman who had moved so many times recounted what it was like trying to get schooling through all this. She told me that for her entire education up to university, she did her homework in the faint illumination of wick, soaked in coconut oil, and then lit in a small clay pot. One sees rows upon rows of these small, delicate vessels, lighting the entrances to covens and temples. They diffuse a soft light appropriate for meditation and prayer, but reading by them is out of the question. Quote, "This is all the oil we could afford," she explained. "My eyes are ruined. My brother was trying to study for his A-levels during all of this. There was only one light in the city at night, and that was the street lamp outside the International Red Cross. I guess they had a generator,